My name is Louise Alcorn, she, her pronouns. So it turns out I need to be careful about outlining my sermons while I'm on vacation. In early August, I was in Michigan, beside a lake, sweaty and exhausted after weeks of stressful changes. I was also in cherry country, wolfing down fruit by the handful because it was too hot to cook, while musing on my spiritual development, which is the theme of this summer. My journey has largely consisted of integrating a variety of sources to make sense of my spiritual self, which sounds really organized, but it's been pretty messy. So hence, cherry picking from different sources. Perhaps if I'd been in Minnesota, I would have apple picked this sermon. So in recent summers, the celebrant team has asked members and friends of the church to share their spiritual journeys, practices, and stories. I really enjoyed working with Nancy Harris and later Warren Stein on their summer services. They were great. So when I was asked to speak this summer, I figured I'd sit down and I would flesh out my elevator speech for you. Mark Stringer, former minister of this church, used to exhort us to create our own elevator speech about our UU faith. Basically, a clear, short explanation of what UU is to you, which freaked me out when he asked us. When I was young, I was raised UU, and so when I was young, about all I could articulate was, we respect others' beliefs, we try to be kind, respect the earth, and potlucks. Still true, but I fleshed that out a little bit. So the cherry picking concept from here and there metaphor is pretty apt, as UUism is meant to pull from many traditions, right? Today we call it faith formation, but when I was a kid, religious education, when I was a kid, included a lot of curriculum experimentation. It was the 70s. Macaroni art, and no small amount of confusion. But I've talked about that before. So today I thought it might be amusing to give you a glimpse into how I pick my spiritual cherry basket. There's my metaphor. I got it for you. My messy, squishy process of figuring out what in the world has meaning to me. So, like a greatest hits album, I revisited the services we've hosted this summer on the theme of exploring our spiritual paths. From Reverend Laura Kim's bird-themed service in June right up to now. So, greatest hits. So I have to stop and say this. So, if you want my actual elevator speech writ large, just listen to Al Power's talk on August 11th. Seriously, I got back from vacation trying to rack my brain to explain my beliefs while also trying to prep to go back to work. The next day, I came to church and Al just pretty much laid my worldview out on a platter. Bingo. Gently optimistic secular humanism. Yep. Add a dash of magical thinking, and that's probably me in a nutshell. He even had Bruce play Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong, which always feels like the perfect humanist anthem. So here are some summer services cherries of wisdom that resonated with me. Reverend Joyner encouraged us to be aware of and connect to our existence in the natural world. So some of you know I'm afraid of birds. Yeah, but Laura Kim, bless her, is slowly bringing me around on the whole bird thing. Like, I can appreciate them. I'm still scared, but I can appreciate them. Later in the summer, Bill Brock read a Mary Oliver poem declaring we were part of the family of things. By the way, Mary Oliver showed up a lot this summer. She seems to just get us UUs, just saying. As a child in the UU church, there was this time in the late 70s when Native American spirituality was all the rage. That family of things always made sense to me. So I was totally on board with feeling the air, centering yourself in the earth, opening yourself to nature. I got a bit annoyed with all the drumming, though. Even at 9 years, yeah, right? Even at 9 years old, I felt icky about cultural appropriation, even before I knew what that word was. At the same time, I did know that my Sunday school teachers were well-meaning, kind-hearted, and occasionally lightly stoned hippies. So just as in much of my life to come, I cherry-picked what I needed from the experience and let the rest go. I still suck at drumming. So last June, Reverend Houghton from the Zen Center reflected that our spiritual journey is following a path down which our hearts are drawn. I love that. I thought that was fabulous. When asked about his beliefs, he prefers to say he feels it or knows it rather than believes it, which is a good way to approach an elevator speech. I don't know that I can say what I believe, but I can tell you how I feel and what I know. Hearing other people's journeys always makes me question my own, which is probably the point. Listening to Reverend Houghton describe his life-changing journey to Buddhist priest in the second half of his life, my brain asked, so what have I done? And now, in what I hope are my middle years, what's my second half? Where has my heart drawn me? Short answer, into public service. Again, I've talked about that before, but that cherry's picked, great. In early July, Amy Landrigan from Central Iowa Shelter Services encouraged us to do what we can for those in need, to see them, to see ourselves. The initial reading that week, A Culture of Care, had me taking notes on my order of service. It was really good. I need to go back to it. So did listening that week mean I went out and volunteered my already overbooked time at a shelter? No, not yet. I did go home and gather up every good pair of shoes I have, which I haven't worn in a while, so someone can walk in comfort. I spent a moment in gratitude for what I have and what I can give. And gratitude is a very tasty fruit. My longtime pal, Sally Buckholt, showed us the tapestry of her woven spiritual journey. During the meditation, we heard that none of us alone have the answer. Well, thank goodness for that, because I need help with the questions. Sally actually met with the Pope, around her community organizing work. Again, what the heck am I doing with my life? She shared that her tapestry is on a loom of power, love, anger, and imagination. She reframed power, and this hit me, via the words of Dr. King, and I listened and I added that to my basket. Some of you have heard my services over the years on the topic of fear. It's my big thing. Similarly, Sally suggested we should get more comfortable with anger. Yeah. For me, anger comes out of fear. And so much of my internal life is woven, as it were, around how I approach my fears. In the reading that Elizabeth shared earlier, we are encouraged to choose love over fear, wisdom over cleverness, courage over cowardice, life over death, kindness over callousness, faith over cynicism. That path is a constant struggle for me, but I listened to that reading and I learned from it and it goes in my basket. Now, if you heard any of my fear services, you know I like to keep it funny. And it's not because I don't take these deep things seriously, but it's because I do. And this stuff is hard. And here's a permanent addition to my spiritual basket. Everything is a bit easier if you can laugh. At yourself, at life's absurdity, but not at others' pain. A newer friend of mine, Elliot Nolte, asked us to pay attention, to pray attention, to where we are and how we connect with others. A reading they offered echoed the words of one of my favorite songs from church choir, "We Are," by Dr. Isaiah Barnwell of Sweet Honey in the Rock. Bruce very kindly played it during the offertory. I remember my mind just went to that song as Heidi Levine gave the reading, and in my head, it's the soundtrack of Eliot's sermon. This is from the song, we are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of the ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, sons of great visions. We are sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builder of nations. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. So no great surprise to those of you who know me, music is a huge source in my spiritual journey. From the folk music of my hippie RE classes, to the jazz my father rediscovered and shared with me in my tweens, to the Europop music of my teen years, thank you 80s, to the opera my mother taught and sang. By the way, don't count on opera to give you answers. The music is fab, but those plots are wackadoodle. But I listen to rhythm and pulsing beats and Dave Brubeck's 5/4 time, and I suppose it helps me hear the universe. I prefer lyrics to poetry, even though I'm told they're the same thing. My inner spirit has a soundtrack, and it's got breadth. Bach and the Indigo Girls get equal time, and that's okay. Thanks to my UU upbringing, Cat Stevens, thank you, Paul and Jane, inhabits a healthy chunk of my inner MP3 player. At the end of July, Faith Leonard, member of our church and of our awesome staff, offered a reading which witnessed the love of God in all creation, loving each other fully for who we are. Thanks to my childhood congregations, an early and growing cultural acceptance of LGBTQ people was part of my actual church experience. It varied in different congregations, but blessedly was way ahead of the national consciousness. No one ever declared from my childhood pulpits that my queer friends, my biracial friends, my non-Christian friends were anything less than human and worthy of respect. For this, I am daily grateful. That was an easy cherry pick, to respect others as you would be respected. Got it. So I love listening to Bill Brock, as his voice is radio quality, as you may know, and his heart is large. His responsible search for truth and meaning seems, to my ear, so much deeper and less messy than my own. Listening to him and later to Al Powers, I wondered, not for the first time, if coming from a more rigid, defined religious background, as they both did, makes the move to a UU home more definitive. I mean, I grew up in UUism. I can't say I chose it deliberately, really, except perhaps in one way. So Linda Lemons recently reminded me that Reverend Stringer used to end his membership Sundays saying, "You became a member not when you signed a book, but when you were disappointed and came back anyways." In that way, I have chosen to be a UU over and over and over. So too often I felt my religious upbringing gave me no clear answers. Like, is there a God? I was offered visions of earth goddesses, a vengeful Old Testament God, a buddy Jesus. When I was 9, I was in an early version, again, a lot of experimentation in the 70s in RE, at least at the church I was at. I was in an early version of the Church Around the Corner curriculum. Do they even do that still? That's what it was called for a while. We went to a Jewish temple, a Black church, and a televangelist. Variety. At the end of the course, I had no answer to the question of God, but I discovered that I don't like to be yelled at in church. And church isn't church without music. So, to this day, I'm a little white, educated UU kid, and every time I hear gospel music, I come out in goosebumps. None of the messages are my messages, per se, but that music of faith, so from Bach to gospel, back again, stirs me like nothing else. I don't understand it, so it's a kind of magic. That's where my magical thinking comes in. Later, I also found I liked laughter in church because shared joy is as close to God as I have ever found. Shared joy when we sing together, shared joy when we laugh together. That's about as close to God as I've ever felt. So I stuck those in my basket when I moved on. So I love listening to how people found UUism. Bill and Al both concluded, hey, I've been a UU for years, I just didn't know it. I've heard that so many times. I love it. Sarah Chung said that she just knew this was the place for her. It's where she was supposed to be. When I was exploring colleges in my teens, I visited Grinnell down the road, and I came back and I told my mom, hey, they're UU, and they don't even know it. Technically, they were Congregationalist, but I claimed them nonetheless. So often in my 4 years at Grinnell, intellectual exploration would follow, however unwittingly, the Humanist Manifesto that Al shared this summer. The value of responsible science, innovation, and the arts, that humans are part of nature and have inherent worth and dignity. Familiar? So to quote the manifesto, we accept our life as all and enough, distinguishing things as they are from things as we might wish or imagine them to be. We welcome the challenges of the future and are drawn to and undaunted by the yet to be known. So college offered an abundance of wisdom to pick from, as well as more folk music. So that was all good. Laura Kim told us to look to nature and let it amaze us. Sally encouraged us to look at people and see them. Al believes that fundamental rules apply to everyone. Be good and do good because it's the right thing to do. Eliot quoted our old friend, poet Mary Oliver, who asked us, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Sarah declared her belief that focused energy in prayer, in activism, could manifest change. I find I envy her stated belief that events unfold as they're meant to, and thus on a grand scale, all is well with the universe. I hope so. Sometimes I even feel it. I feel it most deeply when I see people coming together to do good, sometimes accidentally. I nearly always feel it when humans come together to sing or laugh with joy. So just this summer, I've filled my basket with cherries aplenty, ideas, inspirations, challenges. I look forward to what fruit this next year will provide. Thank you, summer friends, for sharing your bounty.